This podcast is brought to you by Steede Motor Group, Claregalway. For your personalised vehicle shopping experience, find out more at steedemotorgroup.ie. So delighted now to be joined by Jeff Lynskey, and hopefully we'll have former Galway under-20 manager Brian Hanley in the next few minutes as well. Just to look back on the hurling over the weekend. Jeff, maybe one or two surprises in Senior B, but the senior hurling quarterfinals and intermediate hurling quarterfinals kind of went along the lines as we expected.
Yeah, kind of fairly disappointed with the games overall. Really, all like it was Saturday. You were expecting a bit more from Castlegar, but like with Juror sidelines, you were kind of wondering where they were going to get scores out of, in particular. Sarsfields' performance, really high standards on Sunday. Loughrea, Clarenbridge, again, Loughrea 15 scores in the first half, 9 wides. 15 scores is still some amount to put on the board. But yeah, look, all in all, Thomas has been kind of fairly disappointed probably with their first half performance. Really, the 20 attempts, there's only 40% conversion rate, so like they know that they have work to do.
And it didn't impress you over the weekend in particular?
Sarsfields form, and really, the way they hurled, the way they dealt with things, like Joseph was allowed to sit again. Niall Quinn picked up Niall Burke, and their performance levels. Kevin's performance level, I think, was 211. He got again. So like you're looking at them. They'll be going to a semi-final now and looking to kind of avenge what happened last year to them. And the Turlough Moor, Loughrea won. Again, like Turlough, very impressive second half, I thought. In terms of the subs they brought on, the quality of their play improved a huge amount. And they're getting better and better game by game. Jamie Holland got 1-1, Sean Hanlon 5 points from play. So that middle third for them is fairly effective.
And we're joined now as well by Brian Hanley, as well, former Galway under-20 manager. Brian, we were just saying there, not really any major surprises in the senior championship over the weekend.
No, I suppose you'd have expected that. I suppose I think Sarsfields given the Drummond tour more that they did was probably a bit unexpected. But I think all in all, I think the 4 teams are expected to win did win. I think Loughrea probably, they were better than their 2 points for a finish. Turlough Moor are probably the dark horses at the moment. Like, they're showing a bit of form at the right time. More than Sarsfields probably didn't start the championship all that well and are coming into it. So it'll make it interesting for the semi-finals.
So just lads, to get in, I suppose, to touch on that Loughrea Clarenbridge game. You mentioned it there, Brian. Did you feel the scoreline did flatter Clarenbridge in the end?
It did, without doubt. Like, the goal before half time was against the run of play, and I think Loughrea's strength and depth, and they're getting that back, and they're in a good spot. You know what I mean? They were better than their 2 points. You know what I mean? Victory, but the stadium's funny. If you're playing the stadium, it's a game. Really, it is a game of two halves with the wind most times that you're playing there. So it does have a big effect on it. And if you can stay in the game in the first half, which Clarenbridge did give themselves a chance, where Moore didn't really, But I think Loughrea were always in command of that. They never looked like losing it. But I think Jamie Ryan is a stand-up performer for them. The way when the game was in the melting pot, it was he that came up with 2 points and set up the goal. And I just think they're in a very good position.
The answer different, Jeff, from Loughrea that you haven't seen maybe before?
The spread of scores, as always with them, like it's like Jamie, the last setting was 11 points, sideline 2 from play. Like, still had 9 wides in that first half that Tommy the lads wouldn't be happy with. Tiernan got 1, Ducky got 2, Martin Mack 1, 2, Joe got 1, left another one behind him. They'll always have a spread of scores, but like Turlough Moor played them earlier in the year. The did a job with them in the league game, and I know league can be a totally different championship, but Turlough will go into that semi-final, and I agree with Brian in terms of they're coming to form at the right time, no more than Sarsfields. And like all these 4 teams will go into semi-final believing that they can cause an upset. But look, it will all depend, as Brian says there, in the stadium, with the weather conditions. Touch wood, the weather is good, and you'll have enjoyable game of hurling. But if it was not like Saturday was a tough day for the 2 games in particular. Sunday was a lot better. But look, it's going to be interesting, Paul, in terms of how I still think that Turlough more middle eight is getting stronger and stronger. Kevin Hussey's back, Jamie Holland, Sean O'Hanlon, Dan Loftus, Dahi Burke, they have a very strong middle eight. Inside line, again, they're going to need more from them again the next day. And look, if you curb Jamie, the rest of the boys are going to have to stand up, and that's something that Turlough are going to have to do if they're going to win a semi-final.
It's obviously something that's going to be mentioned. Jamie Ryan's form, sorry, for Loughrea. He's been probably the standout performer, Brian, across the Galway Senior Hurling Club Championship, and I suppose a lot of people are going to expect him to get a real chance for Galway this year, because even that performance there, as you mentioned, straight after halftime, Jamie Ryan was getting enough treatment, you could say, from Oisin Salmon at the weekend, but he was still able to keep his cool and is just, I suppose, thrive under this leadership role with Loughrea.
Yeah, but there's a common denominator in the 4 teams, and it's in every team that happened to win county finals in the last number of years, is they've got one marquee forward. Like, the standout player in the club championship has been Conor Cooney for me the last number of years for St. Thomas's, and then they have Ian Burke as well. So they've 2 massive forwards that'll step up. You have Jamie Ryan and any one of the Loughrea forwards can be the big player, whether it's McManus or whoever can come in. And then you go to Sarsfields, you have Kevin Cooney, who was unplayable the last 2 games, you could say, and probably 3 games he's been unplayable. Do you know what I mean? And then Turlough more up the other end, they're chipping in. They don't have the out and out forward to go on, but they have multiple. So it's a common denominator who's going to do that. And I think for me, if you're going to beat Thomas, you're going to have to hold Conor Cooney, because he is to them what probably Eugene Cloonan was to us. He was just going to guarantee X amount of scores every day. And that this time of year with this weather, and then huge thing for both them 4 teams is the free taker. Like, you look at Jamie Ryan, the points he got the last day, Kevin Cooney, the points he got, Evan Nyland, the scores he got. It was just run the mill stuff they're going to get them, like. And Conor Cooney brought that last year when the game was the melting pot. He was able to step up and do that. And they're the big dilemmas now that comes into it. They're huge factors. They wouldn't be if this championship was played in June or July or even August in better weather. The dilemmas are taken out of it a little bit. They're not as to the 4 as they are now. But I think that's where your key thing is. And yeah, Jamie Ryan has been outstanding. I alluded when I started this chat with you that the last day he stepped up, and I think you will be talking about 2 out of 4 of them come the results in the semi-final.
Just even at the start of that game, 19 minutes gone, Jeff, Loughrea 11-6 up, and just really seemed to cause Clanbridge issues from the start. Even you look at Brian Carey's point from distance, or even when they just went direct, just in those kind of opening 20 minutes, just seemed to be causing Clanbridge issues all over the pitch.
The Clanbridge puck out, Paul, caused them huge bother. Long puck out, they couldn't get on breaks, and the short puck out for them, to go came out with a ball, spilled it. There was just an accuracy in their short passing a couple of times in that first half to put them under huge pressure. If they didn't find TJ, they were kind of in trouble. And again, look, the stadium, it's an awful lot of work if you get the ball in the cornerback spot in Pearse Stadium and trying to get that ball up to the far side of the pitch. I just thought the Clanbridge puck-out strategy let them down an awful lot in the first half, especially. They got none of any ball really, apart from the last one that Josh Ryan got the goal from. Mark Kennedy got no ball in the first half. Josh Ryan probably got 1. And after that, I don't recall any ball that was gone inside the 21 either. Keane Salmon was a huge loss. He rolled his ankle in the warm-up, so he was a big loss for them as well in terms of a ball winner that you could have put out in the half-forward line. Half-time, they had to put Shane Ryan up wing forward. So look, they were just, slightly off it. Puck out's not functioning. But Loughrea are an experienced seasoned team now. And look, if you don't have your puck out functioning, especially in Pearse Stadium against that breeze, you're going to be in trouble, Paul. You're going to be in trouble, and that's what the case with Cambridge were in the first half, especially.
But that's struggling just all over. Like you say, Puck, I suppose, is struggling with their Loughrea's physicality as well, that just Cambridge weren't able to match.
Yeah, but sorry, Jeff. The big thing there though was that they had no ball winners. Like they had no ball winners. Jeff is right. Like they could go short and then hit it long. They had no ball winner to get the first phase ball, and that's what was killing them. Like that's what was killing them. So like Jeff is dead on. Like if you don't have a puck out that works for you inside the stadium, you're going to be hit up. And they were getting it both sides. Whereas the other teams, particularly Thomas's and Loughrea, they have a strategy. They can mix it up and they can gain success either way of it.
I'd say, Paul, the Loughrea puck out in the first half, they were creating a pocket of space in probably the 10 channel. Martin Mack seemed to come on the diagonal a whole lot. Jamie was running on the ball, it was hitting grass. And obviously the Cambridge backs were going man to man as opposed to zoning. So Loughrea had a plan in the first half with the breeze. Cambridge, look, when they look back, they got the goal, tonic goal for half time. But you were looking for them in the second half, especially to kind of step it up. But they weren't able to match Loughrea's quality of play in particular. And Jamie Ryan, was to the fore with that. The goal they got that he set up Martin Mack was a beautiful turn. I know people were saying Oisin was caught, but Jamie turned in a sixpence. What was it, 1-7 to 1-6 in the second half? Cambridge won it with the last puck from a penalty. But I just thought Cambridge were kind of struggling all year. The performance level against Clonmerdaley, they weren't able to match. They were lucky, really, to get over the line against Ardran. If Ardran had taken their couple of scores at the end, would have been a different conversation. So all year long, you're trying to find form. And if you're all year long trying to find form, when you get to latter stages, you're going to be struggling. And that's what the case was the last day against Loughrea.
Yeah, and there was somewhat an element of luck, Brian, with the goal. Obviously, they took the long ball, comes from TJ, but like Joshua Ryan does excellently to finish that goal, and it had Clarenbridge going in with somewhat of a high at halftime, given like the 20 minutes earlier on in that game.
Yeah, but that'll give you oxygen. But I think Jeff has it all summed up in the way the puckouts were going, and the way the Loughrea were playing it, and they were struggling for that period. You could see that the game wasn't going to turn just on that. It gave them a bit of oxygen. It gave them a bit of energy. They started the second half well, but still, you just felt that Loughrea Loughrea were getting it easier to get their scores, and that's normally a big sign of the way the game is set up and where they're playing it and the way distribution is coming in. And they were just picking off their scores better, and their decision making was that little bit better on the ball. There was a few times that Clarenbridge got dispossessed and overturned winning attack where Loughrea didn't. But that's what you'd expect. Loughrea had been in, I think I heard a stat, was it over the weekend, that they've been in 18 of the last 22 knockout stages and championships over the last number of years. 18, that's phenomenal. So they have a lot of tradition, a lot of history, and a lot of background to what they're doing. So, they're getting an awful lot right.
It nearly felt like, Brian, when just on that, Cambridge got it back 112-16 on 34 minutes. That was the closest they got it back. And you felt like there was a big push coming, but it was just Loughrea's ability to answer those questions after that. Yeah,
but the team that have been there in the last number of years, you have gained experience, albeit they lost in a replay last year, but you can't buy that experience. So no more than Thomas's, they won't panic. Like they've been there, they won't panic. Thomas didn't panic last year. And to be fair, Loughrea, they didn't panic when they went down the last minute of the drawing game last year. They equalised them. So there's a lot of experience there, and that comes to fore. And that you don't realise when you're playing, but you delve into that and you use that, and that'll stand to them. That is worth a couple of scores to you. And that's why, people remark about Thomas and Capitaga the last day that, it was only the last 15 minutes, but the last 15 minutes when the game needs to be won, and Thomas's, and as all winning teams do, that's when they really push on and drive on. That's the real sign of a good team. And Loughrea did that, to be fair. The last day they dominated, they still won that last 15 minute spell,
Those lasted 15 minutes, and that game as an overall context is Is that a game, Jeff, that Loughrea badly needed, because there probably was question marks of the group that, like, a lot of their games weren't that close, but do you think that game now brings Loughrea on?
Yeah, look, the need of that game, my only worry for them was they went into the championship and the cruise through it, because look, if you look at all the games that they played, I don't think that any tie came whatsoever, Paul. I know they played Middleton in a challenge, there was a couple of points in it. They were fairly happy with the workout. And then obviously the last day against Clare Bridge, bit of history between the two sides for the last couple of years. Look, they'll, as Brian said there, the experience they would have got from last year, the disappointment of it can do one or two things to you. It can fuel you, or else you can coast through the year. And I just know from the lads involved, they weren't coasting all year. They were putting the work in, and then hopefully getting it right. But they've been getting it right all year, Paul, come championship. There was no poor performance. There was consistency in terms of what they were doing all year long. And look, that semi-final is going to be a serious game of hurling between two sides. And look, Turlough will look at it and say it's an opportunity, and they won't fear Loughrea, and vice versa. Sarsfields, for me, then you're looking at it against Thomas's. Can that close the gap that was there last year for them after the semi-final?
So obviously now those semi-finals are Loughrea, Turlough Moor, Sarsfields, Thomas's. Seeing as we touched on Loughrea, we'll just touch now on obviously who Loughrea are playing, and that's Turlough Moor. An impressive performance, Brian, as you mentioned there with Turlough Moor, 220 to 114. You did mention like Turlough, the last few games, there seems to be improvement, and they do seem to be going about their business quite nicely now.
Yeah, they're gathering a good momentum, a good head of steam, but winning brings that, and it's they've contested a lot of these games as well later on in the year. I think injuries has played an awful part in them the last number of years. You know what I mean? They've always had somebody out injured, and you can't afford that. But I think overall they're getting a more balanced side. They're getting key players back. They're getting game time into them, and it's evident as they got game time, they're moved on. They won't certainly be afraid or overawed by playing Loughrea. I think they'll actually look forward to them playing Loughrea. I think it'll be a game that they would have liked, and it'll be hard to call. But I still think, for me, that Loughrea would have the most balanced team and the definitely the biggest strength and depth of any of the four teams left. And I think like Turlough have made great strides, but I think Loughrea would be still that little bit ahead of them.
With that, there was obviously a bit of a switch the last day. Kevin Hussey came in. They moved Killian Whelan then into the half forward line, Jeff.
Yeah, Kevin brings a lot of energy and go forward ball. Like, he's with ball in hand, he'll break the line. Turlough have been moving the ball really well through hand, Paul, through all the rounds. And it's something that Loughrea will have to combat quickly, tracking Dahi when he goes with the ball, Kevin Hussey moving with the ball. The subs that brought on the last day, Tarpey and Killian Whelan, did very well when they came on. So there, as Brian said there, the injuries haven't helped him. Sean Lennon didn't score the last day, but he still had a good outing, So you're just going to rely on that mid lane, as I'm saying. Their full back line is as effective as any full back line that's out there. It's that inside line. Will they click the next day? Like Brian Callan was taken off. Phelan got a goal against Castlegar, good goal. So you're kind of looking at it as Brian touched on there. Loughrea have the more balanced unit. So that's why there probably will be slight favourites on Turlough. But like Turlough will cause them problems with the running game that they have. But no doubt the boys will have the Loughrea as well prepped.
We obviously talked, could Conor Walsh move inside? We've seen him play there at the weekend. How did you think he went in a different role at the weekend?
For me, Conor would always been in the half forward line. But inside, then he'll hold the ball up this time of year. It's a different game completely from what the lads have been doing during the summer. He will keep the ball in there. He's reached a really good level of free taking. He's found a level of form and consistency with them, and they're really important. The other question is, will Sean Loftus be back? I haven't seen him on the pitch at all pucking ball. I haven't seen him involved in the match day, and I'm just wondering, will Sean turn up the next day and see game time?
Just for both of you lads to bring you in there, would you take a risk now with a player like Sean Loftus when it comes to a county semi-final?
And I
Personally,
would.
I wouldn't. Personally, wouldn't. Sorry, Jeff, I wouldn't. No, not starting anyway. I wouldn't. No, not at this stage. Not after they build up ahead of steam and they've taken good momentum. I think they took that risk 2 years ago, Thomas, in the final with Dahi, and it didn't work. So for me, I'd always be starting with your best and see where it takes you.
I'd use him, Paul. I wouldn't start him. You know, it
Yeah,
depends on what they lined up for the weekend. If he got through this week and got through 20 minutes of hurling at the weekend, it's an awful big ask for someone that's been out, say, for 12 weeks and to push them back in. But if you want them to get ready for a county final, is there a 2 week gap between the semi-final and final again? Or is there
Yeah,
three? So
I
like
think so. Yeah.
if you're going to get over it and there's 20 minutes to go and there's a point to win it, and you know Sean gets on the ball, he might get a score for you. You're probably going to have to take a gamble. The last time Mellows won the final, they brought Fintan Burke on full forward after his cruciate. He got key scores and one key ball at the end. So like it's something you just if he's medically okay, you'll go with it. If the player feels confident himself and he's fit and he's got through the last block of work over the last 2 or 3 weeks, yeah, fine. Obviously not to start, but you would hopefully use in the last 5 or 10 minutes.
The first half with Turlough and Castlegar, it just always felt like Brian Turlough were able to just keep that lead at 2 points all the way through the first half.
yeah, it was a bit similar to Loughrea. You just felt that they were always in command. They were always going to push on and consolidate their lead at some stage, and that's what they did. I think Castlegar, did they fall short? Not quite sure. They are very still over reliant on Jeff Farrer being a mainstay of their team. I think Turlough, it was a good draw for them. It was a good game for them, and it has set them up nicely. But I think it's the confidence thing with Turlough now that they need to bring from that, and a system of play that they know can beat Loughrea. Jeff mentioned it there about the way they'd go up ball in hand. 2 years ago, we played them, and I was with Crowell, and that was very evident as well. But when it got turned over, it was the speed that you could get them back with, and whether the recovery was there. I know they've worked on that since, but that if it breaks down and if you have a bad day inside in the stadium, that style of hurling isn't what you really want to be bringing to beating the Loughrea, because a mistake in a turnover. You could see the last day, any ball that went short and the puck out and a bad touch, it nearly resulted in a turnover score. When you're playing that high percentage in there, it can't go wrong, and particularly if it goes wrong against Loughrea, you will be punished.
Brian, Sean O'Hanlon's been one of these players you've worked with at under 20 level. He's been really impressive in the club championship, being able to just pop up with crucial scores at crucial times. 5 points from play the last day. He's surely getting closer and closer now to some would say a proper chance with the Galway seniors.
Yeah, but he was in there last year. I think he got a game for about half an hour against Antrim. I think it certainly didn't help him in his development with us, because his form with us wasn't as good as it's showing now. He's getting regular game time, and I think he's improving from that. Sean's a fine hurler. Our problem was whether we played a wing back or wing forward. We got more out of him playing a wing back, but he's a good hurler. He's a good athlete, and he's filling out now, and that's really going to stand to him. And he's a good competitor, Sean. I think really last year he showed his worth when they won that under-20 final against Sarsfields. I thought he's exceptional in both days, particularly the first day when they drew it. He came back out the field and he consolidated everything and became a leader, and that's what he can bring to it. And I think over time he will step up to one of the main men in that Turlough side.
Yeah, even the last day, Jeff, 5 points, but that's just been a common theme with them all across the championship for coming
I
up
don't
with
recall him
crucial
getting
scores.
a wide Brian all year in the championship. I'd say his scoring stats, lads, his scoring efficiency is up around 95%. Anytime you see him with the ball in hand on the run, you're near guaranteed it's going to be over the bar, which is a huge thing. And it's obviously that, look, Turlough have looked at it, they have enough backs and they've pushed him on. He won't get that time the next day. I'm sure the Loughreans will have a plan for him. Definitely, but yeah, look, he's in you well with the senior panel last year, but I'm just looking at Jamie Ryan. If these lads don't get time at senior level consistently over a year, 2 years, they're not going to progress on. So for me, you're looking at the championship president. Kevin Cooney's firing now because he's had a program of games over the last year and a half, 2 years with the seniors. I've no doubt if Jamie Ryan got the same looking that Kevin Cooney got, that Jamie Ryan would be ready to go next year for Go as well. But if they don't get minutes, now I don't know what these lads are doing in training, in-house games. I don't know. but you can only judge them what they're in the club championship. So for me, looking at Sean and Jamie in particular, you're kind of going, yeah, it's going to be an important year for Henry next year with these lads, because he's going to have to kind of go with them early in the year, test them out and stick with them during the course of the year.
Is that the biggest challenge for players trying to get a chance now?
I'd say, look, Brian was at the cold face like I was, and it's a tough station being under 20 manager, because you have 4 or 5 lads up there, and if they're not getting game time and they're coming back to you, their motivation levels and their confidence levels are fairly low, and it's a difficult job for the coaching team to pick these lads up, and it is difficult for the senior manager, because if they're not performing in training, obviously they're not going to go with them. But it's a tough station for them. It's a really hard station for them between that age of 20, 21, 22, 23, because look, they could be in there and they think it's great. They're part of a squad of 34, but if you're there for 9 months and you've seen no minutes whatsoever, and then you're sent back to your under 20, setup, it's a secondary competition for them, and that's a lot of the conversations I would have had with the managers, not only here but down in Cork and elsewhere, when we were discussing it in terms of the motivation of the lads when they were let go or drop back. It was difficult for them.
From your own experience, Brian, how tough is that?
I'd nearly like to say no comment. But, it's just I genuinely, if I start, I'd be here for 2 hours. So I think it's not fair on the player. First of all, it's not fair on the rest of the group, and it's not fair on the management team of 20s. What you have to put up with, because the player suffers first and foremost unless he's getting a run of games, and we haven't had anyone in Galway get that. Maybe Jeff will correct me, but I don't believe we've had. I've seen the Greg Thomas, the Gavin Lee. Tiernan got injured last year. I don't know, the year before he got 28 minutes, missed in a game with us. Liam Collins last year came on for a minute against Kilkenny, got a point and didn't get no game time, missed games. And Sean was in there, he got no game time. We had him for not challenge, and then the weight of expectation between our group was on their shoulders. They felt they had to be the leading light, and it was very hard. Like, we did a lot of one-to-ones, a lot of chatting with them, and you could know that there was that on their head, and it was only like a mutual friend of myself and Jeffrey Gordon Crowley who'd have dealt with you, Jeff, an awful lot in that, and he gave me the same. We went through the same thing this year, and it's very hard on the player, and it's very hard in the group after that. But can you guarantee them a run of games? No, you can't, and that's I'm afraid is the conundrum that you have, and it's not a quick fix. But I think, like Jeffrey said, there's a lot of lads there that haven't got consistent game time for Galway. We're really, like, Jamie Ryan must be in that panel for Galway 5 or 6 years. I don't remember him playing a league game. I think maybe one. Ian Burke, was he in there last year? Did he get game time? I don't know. Kevin Cooney's definitely benefiting from it, and that's where the likes of Tiernan and Gavin Lee with Clarenbridge needs a run of games. Evan Island has benefited from getting the run of games, and that's where Sean Hanlon's going to have to get a run of games if he's going to step up, and he needs that. But it's unfortunately to get these games, when they do get them, it's in January, February, when it's really not going to be conducive to what's going to happen later on in the year.
Can this rule be altered? Obviously, we have this 7-day rule with it, or can something be done, do you feel, to help it?
Look, I don't mind saying no. I think the lads should be left completely with the 20s. I don't think they're ready physically or mentally for what comes when they go into a senior setup. And that's me, that I was there for 3 years, Brian was there for 2. I can say what I want now at this stage. There's no one going to say anything to me, but I think the lads with their own development and their own mental health and well-being, they should be just left with 20. Or either take them up to senior and leave them there. But having to take them back, it doesn't work for either party. But if you're going to bring them up, use them and develop them, and look after them. And Galway do look after them in terms of supports and whatnot, but in terms of minutes, that's the most important thing. The most important thing that Henry can give the lads is confidence. And that's a tough job as a manager. And they all want minutes and they all want game time. And he can't promise them that. And his job is a tough job because it's based on results. And he's trying to keep the top 15 happy. Then he's trying to keep the 15 to 26 happy. And then if you're 26 to 34, you're not happy coming back and training the following week if you haven't met the squad. So it's a juggling act non-stop for him. But I just, from my own experience, either leave them 20, bring them up and leave them there, but don't be trapped in the back down to the 20 manager, because you're picking up pieces.
And even Jeff, with the group that you have, so we, like, you knew you'd play loads of challenges and you were missing 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, whatever the case may be. And all them playing know that when them 5 or 6, 7, 8 come back, they won't be on. And it's just you're preaching to lads who are giving them every bit of confidence you give them, but they know deep down that they probably aren't going to be on when they'll just come back. And you don't see that, and that creates not an anxiety, but it creates a laziness within a group, because, or a lack of motivation might be the right way of putting it. It's very hard. But I would echo what Jeffrey said. Definitely, it's either one or the other. I would definitely stand over that. Definitely.
That's going to be interesting to see that during the season. Just to kind of finish on Turlough and Cashel, obviously a bit reference about Cashel. Do you think Cashel can take a lot of positives from this season compared to the previous season? Because we did get a question in here about the kind of over-reliance still associated with them in regards to Ger Farr.
The need, you're looking at the last day, Ger got the 4 points from sidelines, and looked, it's an incredible skill. I don't know who the last player was to score 4. Probably Ger himself again, or Joe, either or, of the last 25, 30 years. You're looking at the forward unit, and Greg had a really good year for them, had a brilliant year. But then you're looking at Oisin Connolly and Jack Hine then to kind of, if Greg isn't firing, you need them 2 lads to step up. Killian O'Callaghan actually a good campaign as well for them, in fairness to him. Look, they had a good year, Paul. I'd say they were looking at making the top 8. They've done that. They've made progress. But it's the building it. Will Ger go on for another year? I don't know. Like 40 years of age and doing what he's doing. It's a testament to himself, really. But look, yeah, all in all, I don't know Brian's thoughts on it. They'd be happy enough with the top 8 in particular. Probably disappointed with how they went the last and left a lot of chances behind them.
What were you thinking, Brian, when you were seeing Ger Farr float those sidelines over in the second half?
Same thing as I was thinking about 15 years ago when I marked when he cleaned me. I don't know how he does it. Don't know how he does it. I think Jeffrey really wants to say he should have transferred into Mellows. They'd have been very happy if he would have got him years ago. But it's credit to him. Look at I've himself, Niall Healy, Kevin Hines and Sarsfields, what they've done for their clubs, on a consistent base over a long period of time has been remarkable. And they're 3, there's just many more, but them 3 always stand out. But it's a credit to him and what he's done. But I think Castlegar, what happens if Ger doesn't play next year? I think you're taking, would you correct me on this, 10 or 12 points from their scoreline straight away. That's the way I look at it. That's how I'd rate them when you play them. But they caught Crowell. They were 10 or 11 points down twice in the game, came back and won and got through. They got there. But I think it's next year probably a massive year for them now to move on, because if they go backwards again, they're really in a weird position to bring the club on to the next level, which everyone's trying to do.
Just then on the other 2 senior quarterfinals, Thomas's 219, Captagal 12 points. Thomas is probably overall not at their best, but in this kind of opening half in particular, Captagal did try and really make this into a dogfight, Jeff.
Like the first 20 minutes in particular, like as I said to you before, Paul, it wasn't till the 14th minute they got their first score. Shooting efficiency was way down the first half. Bernard Burke is a big loss in the midfield. He's a huge loss for them. I don't know where David's at present. Oisin Flanagan's going fairly well for them inside. Conor Cooney's doing his usual stuff in Aina. Their back 6 is so strong. Shane Cooney is showing really good form at 6. And the last, look, in fairness to Finton and Keane Manny, did the job on Liam Collins and Jeff, so Will Fintan pick up Kevin Cooney the next day? Probably. You know, you're looking at the physicality of the St. Thomas's back six. Will Niall Quinn do what he did against Ardmore and pick up Conor Cooney? I don't think that's a good matchup, to be honest with you. I'd probably swap the two and let Joseph go after Conor because he'd be able from physically. Niall Quinn sit if he has to, you know. So it's going to be an intriguing battle either way. For Sarsfields that are coming team that have, you know, really good young hurlers coming. And it's a very, very seasoned, as we know, St. Thomas's outfit.
Just with that, with Thomas's, Brian, why do you think they struggled in that opening half?
I don't think they struggled. I think they just kept themselves in the game. That's what I alluded to early on. They're just, you look at all Thomas's big victories the same way last year. Sure, Sarsfields should have beaten them in the semi-final if they missed a goal before that time. Thomas has kept themselves in the game. They won the last 15-20 minutes. They did in the county final, drawing game and replay. That's what winning teams do. They know how to win, and they'll find a way to do that. And I think they just keep themselves there, and they keep themselves relevant to the whole piece. They're never too far behind, and then they do finish well. And they trust each other. They have a system of play. They know it. They understand it. I think like David Burke now, when he's involved, has 7 county cups won. That brings massive experience, massive understanding. You know, they know how to win, and they know more than most what it'll take. And when it's going wrong, they have the skill sets to turn around and change it straight away. And I think it's up to the last 10 or 15 minutes in the game. I don't think as long as they're thereabouts, that's all they'll be worried about. And it's not so much what Capategal came at all guns blazing for them and looked great and we had them under pressure. But the last quarter, when it needed to be won, there's only one team going to win it.
No, the loss of Niall Collins, though, Brian, in this was really significant for Capategal.
Yeah, the last, you see, goes back to it again. Like the strength and depth is Loughrea's. Like, you know, most club teams can't cope with losing likes of Niall Collins or, you know, anyone like that. And that's why I go back to Loughrea. Probably are the only ones that they lose one or two, they can still cope. They're still bringing on lads of a good caliber, like Neil Keary when he came on the last stage, you know. So, and Niall Collins undoubtedly would be one of the top 3 or 4 players in Capategal setup. So no, it was a huge loss. But Thomas has had that loss last year. The last James Regan, they came back and still won a county final. You know what I mean? They made changes, and they still won it. So you have to find a way to win, and it's the others who got to step up to play and give them a bit more. And I don't think Capategal, they obviously didn't do that, but I think that's where like Thomas's do have that bit of know-how to make that step up, and everyone seems to raise their game in adversity.
And with that, Jeff, when you consider Niall obviously got the first sideline, he's going to be out now for January with that broken collarbone, which is a massive blow considering the year he was having personally for Capategal.
He had a really good year for Skibbon as well. I was looking forward to getting him back into college, so hopefully he'll see some game time come fits in mid-January. But look, again, as Brian touched on there, you know, for Capategal, it was a huge loss, not only from Freeze, but from his general play as well. Like Decky Cronin had a really good outing again, in fairness to him. Michael Garvey was doing an okay job of holding the centre. But again, they struggled against the Breeze in the second half, particularly. It was 5 puck-outs in a row. There was 1-2 from it, turnovers. And Thomas's will do that too, yeah. You know, but the players that they have, they swarm tackle you know, around the 45. They all converge, tackle really aggressively and turn you over. And they did that probably 2 or 3 times at a key stage in the second half. And eventually just you know, wore down the Capategal outfit.
They always seem to have the response to go 3 or 4 ahead in that final quarter, Jeff. And then when Oisin Flannery gets the goal and Darren Ferrell gets the goal, maybe somewhat it flattered Thomas's, but like they still have that ability to push out those leads in that final quarter.
Yeah, look, their team play at times in terms of this, the team play that they bring, you know, you're looking at them, they're just totally in sync. Brian touched on it there. They have such a high level of team play. Their execution of a hand pass or a stick pass, you know, goes to hand. And when they're in full flow like they were in previous games, and because of weather conditions, that wasn't going to happen on Saturday. But Kenneth, the lads will probably look at the game and say, right, we have a lot of areas to improve here. in particular. But like you're looking at them, and Brian touched on it there. The last James Regan and Shane Cooney was out last year as well, and David Sherry. They've three of them back this year. So look, they are favourites for the county final. There's no doubt about that. But I still think if Sarsfields get it right tactically and the matchups right, they will cause them problems in that semi-final.
Ian Mahoney, Brian, probably one of the most notable performers over the weekends, particularly like himself and Jan Mannion getting to know each other for a lot of that game, but he was really impressive.
Yeah, and another fine performance, like, but you know what I mean, you're going to need a lot of people like that to step up. So this time of year, it's the unknown, not the star players that get you over the line, like, you know what I mean, and that's what every club team needs, and that's what, you know, the winners like Thomas's and Clarenbridge have been the most concerned. Thomas and Loughrea rather have been the most consistent at that, and that's where the next day it's going to be your unsung, the lad we're not talking about today that does a job for you, that whoever picks up someone and gets the better of them, that gets you over the line, and that's what clubs need, and that's why, you know, your panel is going to be crucial now come this time of year. And to be fair to Thomas, last year they were able to survive with the two boys being out, you know, so all credit to them.
Just final quarterfinal then, it was Sarsfields 324 or more 12 points. Jeff, there kind of seemed to be a bit of a flatness to this game in the opening half, but Sarsfields kind of just finished strongly to put them in a good position going into the lead at halftime.
And I think with the breeze especially, you know, you'd be expecting Ardmore to go probably longer more than they did, and they had a total malfunction with their sharp hook out, and Ardmore probably should have got more than, or sorry, Sarsfields should have got more than one goal than did in the first half. Alex Canary and Fox, for me, Brian, I don't know what to think. Like, Foxy, like, is very, very consistent and goes under the radar. Does an awful lot of the simple stuff really well. Alex is kind of floating around the 45, 65, linking up play and getting scores and in the end of stuff, you know. So, like, the two boys are doing really well for them. But, like, it's like anything else. There could have been a bit of a hangover, Paul, from the under-20 final as well for them, some of these Ardmore lads, you know. So, like, I'd say they were very disappointed with the performance levels, very disappointed with the results. But overall, during the course of the year, you know, they did have good outings, they did have good games where they did well. But they're a young outfit, apart from Niall and Garage, obviously. They've an awful lot of young hurdlers coming. They learn an awful lot from that, playing Sarsfields inside the stadium. Probably overdid the short passing, broke down too many times for them. And that's probably the disappointing thing for them, leaving the stadium.
We've all touched on Kevin Cooney's just being unplayable, Jeff, but like, what's he doing at the minute just to terrorise these defences?
Look, his confidence levels, Paul, after playing a full senior year hurling with Galway, probably physically, you know, is at the peak of his powers. You know, the goal he got where John hand passed it across was an incredible leap. But I just remember in the gym sessions in Clarenbridge, he had the highest box jump of any minor that we ever had. You know, he'd box jump 5'8", 5'9", definitely, you know, and that was at 17, 18 years of age. So he's an extraordinary leap on him. But he's just a player probably playing with confidence. Paul has shot the lights out, has scored a goal in every championship match to date. And will relish if Sarsfields can open up space for him, and they can move Fenton left and right and get good quality ball into them. But you'd be expecting to cause them trouble. But it's about getting the right ball into him, and to get him ball in that he's able to take on Fenton, or Keane Manley, whoever picks him up.
This is where Sarsfields do deserve credit, though, Brian, you feel, because it's the last two games, Clymer Daly and Ardmore Mary, where they've defeated both oppositions comfortably.
Yeah, they're look, I agree. Like, they've got so much players that can affect a game for you. Like the Coonies have been just excellent. Like, even John is going to wing forward now. He does a role for them. He plays a very unselfish role for them. And Kevin and Joseph with the back, but you've Kevin Hines full back. You've got like the two lads midfield, Alex and like they're serious players. Like, and they've Niall Quinn has come back. He's done well. Like, they're going to be able to great chance. Like, they had Thomas on the rope last year in that first half. Kevin got the chance for goal playing into the town end, and put it over the bar, and that that was a score they needed. If they got that, that was a different game again. So Sarsfields won't fear Thomas's, and they'll see that as a great opportunity for them to right or wrong.
And they beat them, do you think, Brian?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I think they could. Yeah, I think the Sarsfields, any Sarsfields team down to the years when they get a run on you, no matter who you are, it's very hard to beat them. And no, I think they could. I honestly do. I think they brought on lads the last day that impressed and come on, beat Old Moore throwing the towel in. But the only thing is, in a close game, the last two games they played haven't been of that caliber. You know what I mean? So they've won them pulling up. But it'll be interesting. But I wouldn't write them off at all. But I still think Thomas should have enough.
There's no word, Jeff, on Darren Morrissey. Obviously, went off holding the hamstring here.
I'd say it was cramp.
The cramp, was it? Yeah.
Yeah. I think no, Darren. I'm kind of looking at my say it was just cramp. Touch wood. I haven't heard anything yet. I won't see them lads until probably January anyhow. For the fits. So no, I'd say he'll be fine. It looked like to me to cramp. I don't know. Brian thought, but I just thought it was cramp.
Yeah, no, it must have just been precautionary. Paddy McCarthy as well, Jeff, wing forward the last day. Probably his best performance of the year for Sarsfields.
Yeah, it's been scoring regularly enough in most of the games, getting a lot of shots off. I was fairly impressed with his brother now. If that's an under 14 guy with Galway now, he's going to be some lad coming the next 3 or 4 years. But yeah, no, look, did well the last day. Probably has done better and bigger pitches. I think Sarsfields played in Bannistow for 2 games. But yeah, look, is effective getting on ball, scoring. Still young enough, I'd say. Brian, is he 19-20?
Yeah, he's under 20. He was good last year. He's under 20 for 2 years. My phone might go dead here, and that's what I'm worried about. He was good last year. He didn't get game time with us, but he's underage for 2 years. He came in the 20s, but he does an awful lot of work. His main aim wouldn't be scoring or that, but he did an awful lot of forage, an awful lot of work, an awful lot of sit-up play. And he's a good. He played very well the last year. I was very impressed with the last time.
Just finally there, as we've obviously touched on the semi-finals, but just before we leave the senior champion, just to look at the senior B and intermediate briefly, how disappointing is that now for Roar Moore, Jeff? Obviously, huge strides made this year, quarterfinal, but just when your season finishes like that.
Yeah, look, it takes a week or two to kind of get over it, and then you have to process and look back in the whole year as a whole. They're a common team, in terms of, look, they won a minor A, got done under 20 A final, obviously, took a beating from Clarebridge. Meadows teams that won a county final in 17, that group, a lot of them lads would have lost minors and under 21s. That's all developing for me. I wouldn't be too worried about that. The important thing for them is to build on that. A lot of these lads now are going off to college, in UL, they're in Galway. So they'll be playing a good standard of hurling again. It's to learn from that. Probably look at the way they're playing the game, especially, for me, looking at them, I just thought against Clarebridge, like Liam Lean did an awful lot of hurling around the midfield, wasn't picked up. Obviously, young Nyland, he's an exceptional talent. Could have done more to close him down in that game. The last day just didn't happen, and that can happen any team, Paul, where you go into it expecting a big performance and you fall flat in your face. But I just thought they overdid it in terms of the short passing that wasn't done at times. But look, overall for them, when they settle down and analyse it and review it in probably 3 or 4 weeks, they'll say, right, we're a work in progress.
So that's all on the senior semi-finals there. As we mentioned, Loughrea, Turlough, Thomas and Sarsfields all next weekend. And that they're going to be just 2 cracking semi-finals right down to the wire. Just before we touch on the senior B semis, Brian, you obviously went back in to help out your own club, Athenry, this year. I presume it was a disappointing year, but considering where you found yourselves, just pure relief to stay in senior B.
Yeah, but look at we need to analyse that as a club to do. They need to move on from it. I hadn't seen Athenry playing in a few years. I had with my own commitments, but yeah, look, I only didn't give a hand for whatever way it was. Didn't do much really, to be honest. But they did a good performance against Clymer, and they can only build on that next year. They can't let it go back to where it was last year again. So yeah, look, they're still in the Senior B, and potentially what they can do is be as competitive as anybody else in it and win it, possibly win it, like, you know. But they're a long way off that yet, and they need to get a consistency in training, a consistency of players being there. But look, we have a proud tradition where we're from, and there's a lot more than me. They just helped out Kieran and John for the last few weeks. So no, we're looking to close the book and move on.
Can you put your finger on it? What happened this year?
Nah, well, like this has happened back in 2013. This has been going on now. We haven't competed. Like the last county final we won is 20 years ago now next year, like, you know, so we haven't been at the top table for a long time. It's consistently got worse and worse every year. So, you know, it's not just 1 year, it's been happening over time. And that there's been a lot of things that weren't there in Athenry's way before, whether it be other sports, whether it be travel, whether it be, you know, different things. So it's a combination of things that's now in every other club. And we just had, and we've been judging a good run of it where we had 10 or 12 years of the same 18 lads being as consistent and being around. But look at there's a good bunch there. They played. There's great possibilities, and you know, they'd like to think there's a core group there that if they get it right, that they would push on and move on up. And you don't know, 2 or 3 years, you don't know where you'll be.
Do you believe this group can turn it around?
I do, yeah. I saw enough in this. I was only there for 2 weeks, and I saw enough in that to know them. I know them. I know them for years, like, you know what I mean. But yeah, I think they will. I think they've got a fair fright there this year now, like, you know what I mean. What has happened to them, and they had 101 reasons why they're in that situation. But you know what I mean. It goes back to who will win at the other end of the Senior A is because they've strength and depth and they're able to cope with adversity, and we didn't as a club or as a team. So got to look at that and hopefully get it right and move on. The future is bright in our club. We're winning under 16s. We won the Fela. We're competing still in the minors. We're progressing at Everton. So, you know, it's just a matter of keeping it going and pushing it on if we can at all, and the wheel will come around again.
So just on the Senior B semis over the weekend, Mulla 120, Lee Mellows 18, Haskell 218, Kilnadeem Leitrim 216. Disappointment for your own club, Jeff, at the weekend?
Yeah, look, fairly disappointing year, Paul, really. Didn't fire consistently all year long. I think young Dolphin got 115, you know, of the total that they got. Their shooting was 77% in terms of execution from Mulla, which was fair going, whereas Mellows End was the opposite. It was below 50%. The last quarter, again, in particular, it was 1-6 to 3 points, and that's where Mellows fell down. But look, the lads have been fairly disappointed. And like Brian, you know, they have the winter to analyse it, and there'll be 101 reasons, but at the end of the day, the players have to look at themselves.
Just on Mulla, Jeff, because they've been in Division 3 of the league and they've struggled, but that's obviously down to probably not having the Glennons available. But like the introduction of Sean Callanan and Connor Dolphin this year, they've definitely seemed to be two huge positives that have probably helped Mulla push on compared to previous years.
Yeah, look, young Dolphin, it says only 19, Brian, is he? He's 20 next year. You know, I watched probably 2 games. I watched the Athenry game and I watched the Mellows game. He's a very good shooter, you know, but like Mulla were using the ball fairly well, very traditional in lots of ways. Quick puck out to wing backs and over the shoulder stuff, diagonal ball into him or down the line. And he's moving, he's got really good foot speed, he's low to the ground, he's excellent at both sides and a really, really good free taker. And it's just amazing the improvement in them when you have a top class free taker in the setup and a shooter. And they've improved him. He has improved them a huge amount from this time last year. But there's not. I suppose I have to pay a testament to the lads that I played against as well. Kevin Briscoe was playing. I don't know what age he must be 40, and Kyle Dervin, you know. So these lads, in fairness to them, you know, came back. Dervin was there last year, and still playing away and still playing consistently well.
On the other semi-final, Brian, Kilnadeem looked like they were really going to win this, but it's just credit to Askell. One of the stories of Senior B this year just came in that second half performance with Everton, a kind of a storm, and turned Kilnadeem over by 2 points. It probably was the biggest surprise over the weekend.
Yeah, they've look at apologies if my battery goes here because the charger isn't working, so I'm at 1%, so if it goes. But I think Leitrim fell into a trap where maybe there was too much expected of them and they didn't produce the goods and got caught. They were up in that game all the time. They were winning it. They were doing very well, and then but the two Manions are serious players. Like there's two, if you name in any other club there, but that's their leadership. They're driving that on, and they've been very very consistent in their performances all year, and like they're going to take some beating in the final, I believe, because I think they've had the experience of the few years of Senior B, which has helped them, and they've gone back into that, and they've embraced the position they're in, and they're pushing on, and I think they're in a great chance of winning.
Yeah, you referenced, Jeff, if they got their house in order this year, they'd be a threat, and it's definitely what they've seemed to did this year.
Look, when you have the two Manions, on any team, they're going to find something. When the pressure's really on, the two lads will do something. Mark Kelly is taking the frees for them, so he's found a level there in terms of helping them out, but converting them. Sean Blaheen, probably a bit more in him. Owen Delaney, so they've I knew myself from playing them last year. They weren't on paper. They were well balanced, and if they got their act together, they were going to be a force. But look, you have to pay a testament to Mundy as well, in terms of what they done this year as well. So there was two teams at the start of the year, Paul. We didn't have even the top four, if not the top six. We had Mellows and Athenry 1 and 2, and the whole thing has been reversed. So it'll whoever does get over the line, they're going to have to earn it, and it's going to be a really really tight game, I'd say. And hopefully, the lads will get a good day out. I think the Junior 8 finals on before, isn't it?
Yeah, Duggan Park fixed for you.
Yeah, so that it's going to be a really good day out for the clubs, but they'll want to win it. It's a huge prize for them, to get back up Senior A at the top level, and they've earned it. They've earned the right to be there, and whoever goes out in the day and performs and wants it bad enough, and out for playing these two clubs last year, they bring an awful lot of tradition to it, a lot of fight, a lot of battle, and it'll go down to the wire.
Yeah, so it's Hashkafona and Mullia in the Senior B final. Whoever wins goes up to Senior. The loser will stay then in Senior B for 2024. So a massive amount at stake, you could say there. And then just on the intermediate semi-finals the draw was done after victories for the four clubs over the weekend. Teen Aberdeen against Meath Gaircourt, and the other one then we have Ceylon and Ballindereen. Turlough just getting over on Spidale at the weekend by a point to stay in intermediate. So on Spidale will be a junior for 2024. Brian, Meath Gaircourt probably the most impressive over the weekend when you consider what they did to Kinvara, the weather and everything over the weekend, and putting up a scoreline like 128.
Yeah, so I met Matty Kinney Sunday evening. He was quick to tell me that straight away. So I think that's a very hard game to call. I think you just know that Tenerife are going to be so well organised. It's a massive game. And I think for Gaircourt this year, if they get over that, they won't want to fall into the trap of losing another final. So I think it's a game that you'd love to see. That's a local derby game. That's huge up that neck of the woods. Like, you know what I mean? They're two very proud clubs and have aspirations not alone to be in Senior B, but up even higher than that, and have
I think we just seem to have lost Brian there.
Need to get do you know what to do now, Paul? Get a sponsor for him there for a new battery or new phone, or even a new charger. Talk to O2, one of them companies. We're looking for sponsor, lads. We're buying Hanley's phone for a new charger. Anyone out there know anyone? Yeah.
But just on that, Jeff, we were talking about intermediate. You also had Mealy Cantina one or two. Now they meet in the final, but with them meeting in the semi-final, this is massive for Ceylon and Ballindereen.
Yeah, look, who do you fancy there? Like Ceylon got there last year. Ballindereen, yeah, I'd fancy Ballindereen to get over that one. I just have a feeling, in terms of the result they got the last day, in particular, and the showing that they put up. Will Meath have enough options up top to trouble Abbey Nair is the question. I don't know, will they? I'm not too sure where John Fleming's playing for them. He was playing 6 earlier in the year.
James Downey seemed to be top scorer, 14 points at the weekend.
Yeah, so look, you're just in terms of balance and players in each line, you'd have to go with Tina. But as Brian touched on there, look, you have the Matty Kenny factor, the Liam Hodgins factor, but the Decky Walsh factor was at the weekend there, and Cardmore nearly caught them. I think Cardmore were a point or two up with a minute or two to go, and they found a way to get over the line. So yeah, look,
is that huge for Tina to win a game like that?
Yeah, look, they were coasting all year long, Paul, so they didn't get a test. Really, probably the last group game, they probably changed things up because they were qualified. But look, when you win a game like that, and the way you've won it like that, you've had to dig deep, you've had to go to a well. It does help the group in terms of confidence for the next day out. But look, the game against Munich Aircourt, it's a local derby. Neither side will want to lose to each other. It'll be a fairly interesting game in terms of where they're going to place it now, because I presume it's going to be in Ballinasloe.
I think the plan is there that those two games plan to be a double header on the Saturday, but then that's the same day as the junior and senior B final, which is going to be in Ballinasloe, and then it looks like we're going to have the two senior games in Pearse Stadium on the Sunday. Okay,
yeah. So look, it'll be interesting. From the point of view, look, you're looking at it in terms of the management teams and the players. You're saying, yeah, 100% Tina, but then you're looking at Aircourt in terms of last year, what they had to go through, lost the final against local derby against Clymer, and they'll want to better that. And as I said already, if you tasted defeat in a final, it does give you a huge amount of hurt and energy the following year, providing you can channel it in the right direction. So Aircourt won't want to experience that again and get themselves back into a county final.
And just on Ceylon, big win, 12-point winners over Ballindereen at the weekend. Or sorry, not Ballindereen, Clembridge.
Yeah, again, if you're looking at the games all year long, in fairness to them, have found a consistency in everything that they're doing. But again, look, Ballindereen, anytime they come with a team like this, they tend to get into a final and tend to get over the line. So look, it'll be two interesting ties in terms of and not novel enough pairings as well, which is probably nice to see in terms of developing hurling around the county, especially with Ceylon back in it again. And you'd want something from East Galway in particular. You'd want Tina or Aircourt back up in Senior B, and hopefully then you'd get a few more teams pushed back up to Senior A, because it's important. I would say the top four, Paul, there's not much between the teams in Senior A. Senior B is a lot more competitive. As Brian touched on there, at the right, would be very disappointed with the year they had, and Mellows would be disappointed with the year they had. But it's a difficult station if in Senior B or intermediate, if you don't put the work in early in the year and get the group gathered together and find the level of performance that you need, it's going to put you back into a final and hopefully get you over it.
Yeah, so that's all on our show for today, looking back at the action. We'll be back next week with a preview of huge games for the huge clubs, hoping to reach those county finals, and of course who's going to win that Senior B decider between Haskell and Mullya. But that's all we have time for today. Thanks a million to the lads for jumping on.